Warning, the show you are about to watch is very, very naughty. They talk about scary movies and frightening stuff and other really inappropriate things, and it's only appropriate for people over the age of 18, and frankly, even they shouldn't watch it, and if you keep watching, I wash my hands of the whole thing.
Zombies, mermaids, and TJ Hooker's partner. It's all coming up next on Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat. Good evening and welcome to Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat, PBDCtv's place for a fun conversation about horror movies. I'm your host, Steve the Cat. They say that everyone has to start somewhere, and I suppose it's true. Even the biggest stars have to start somewhere, and a lot of times that place is in a horror movie. There are plenty of examples. Jamie Lee Curtis got her first featured film role in Halloween. The 1994 film Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation featured both Matthew McConaughey and Renee Zellweger, right before they broke through and became stars. George Clooney has an appearance in the 80s classic Return to Horror High, and, going back even farther, if you look closely in Revenge of the Creature, Universal's sequel to the classic Creature from the Black Lagoon, you'll catch one scene with a very young Clint Eastwood. So tonight we're doing another blind box special from the 1980s. This one featuring an actress who later became world famous as a mermaid, and an actor who soon became TJ Hooker's partner. This is a blind box special, which means none of us had ever seen the film before we put it on the schedule. So the review is based upon our very first viewing, no matter how good or how bad the film turns out to be. We're also doing a film from 2017 that gives another take on the classic theme of zombies versus strippers, and is much better than you would expect. But before we get into that, we've had some user emails come in from people concerned about Carl, since he's been placed under a curse. So let's do a quick check-in with our associate producer, Fancy the demonically possessed animatronic, who's been keeping tabs on Carl. Fancy, what have you got for us?
Well, Steve, if you look at the scoreboard, you'll see that the curse got off to a slow start, but has started to pick up speed. Not only did Chick-fil-A get his order wrong last week, Roy Rogers ran out of drumsticks, so he had to substitute 2 thighs in his fried chicken meal. Then the pharmacist at Walgreens was on her lunch break when he went to pick up a prescription the next day. But the biggest news is the jury summons. Carl's not been here for the last 4 days because he got tapped for jury duty. At the rate the curse is gaining strength, I figure he'll be dead in another week or so. So we've got that to look forward to. That's all for now. Back to you, Steve.
Poor Carl, cut down in his prime by a curse. But I suppose that's what he gets for angering somebody with supernatural powers. On an unrelated note, if anyone out there has writing experience and is interested in working for an internet streaming show for no pay, please send us a DM. And with that, we're going to get tonight's show started. Thank you so much for joining us. We're really glad that you're here. Now grab a seat and relax, because here we go.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is, well, just call me Crimson Meerkat. Yes, that's my code name, Crimson Meerkat. I am the leader of a scientific endeavor called Project Brevity, who is tasked with the search for extraterrestrial life. But sometimes I have to do other things. Like today, when Fancy called me up and said Carl's been on jury duty this week, and he didn't write anything before he left, so I needed to come up with something to fill a segment on tonight's show. Now, I would refuse, but Fancy controls the oxygen supply up here on the orbital broadcast platform, so that really wasn't going to go anywhere. Anyway, I am a credentialed writer, but I also have a lot of other things to do, so long story short, you're getting a brand new music video from my chief science advisor, Malcolm Fluffosaurus, or, as he's known on stage, DJ DynoFluff. Listen, I've had to listen to it all week, so now you're going to hear it. Please enjoy. Or don't. I really don't care.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the second labor of Hercules. Are you ready? Here we go. Crashing through the woods, it's got 6 heads. It's short and it's stubby and it's painted all red. It's a hydrant. Yeah. it's a hydrant. Yeah, yeah. Flexing with my blade, getting ready for the slaughter. But then it sprouts a hose and it sprays me down with water. It's a hydrant. Yeah, yeah. It's a hydrant. Yeah, yeah. So I chop it on the neck and her head hits the floor. But my labor isn't finished cause it grew 2 more. It's a hydrant. Yeah, yeah. It's a hydrant. Yeah, yeah. Now sometimes Greek myths are strange, and this is where the story takes a strange turn. Because according to the story, I took a torch and burned the hydrant on the neck to keep it from growing new heads. But that makes no sense. How could a torch hurt the hydrant when hydrants put out fire? It just doesn't make sense.
It's Hydra, you buffoon! Hydra! It's a mythical creature with 6 heads. Why would Hercules be battling a hydrant? The Greeks didn't have plumbing.
So then a rude monkey appeared and cast a magical spell and turned the hydrant into a mythical creature that looked like a giant, parakeet.
Lizard, you dope!
And then he cast another spell and turned it into a lizard. So I chopped off its head and then I burned it with a torch, and it couldn't grow a new one cause its neck had been scorched. No more Hydra. No, no, no more Hydra. No, no.
Malcolm, seriously, how can you be so stupid? How do you not drop dead from sheer embarrassment? I'm just at a loss.
So once the Hydra was dead, I went away to be alone because that monkey said some really hurtful things. And I needed to work through those feelings. Maybe I'll write some poems. I don't know, rethink my life.
Moron. 10 more labors to go, folks. Consider yourselves warned. I'm gonna go find some Xanax.
And now it's time for our featured film reviews.
Marco! Hey, Marco! Marco!
Marco!
Marco!
We're not going to be able to get on the river today because of you guys.
Marco!
Hey, Mike, come on. We didn't mean any harm.
Fun's fun, but not all night.
Man, they done it to me 1,000,000 times. They did it to me when I first came.
Marco!
Come on, Mike, it ain't that serious.
Is this it?
Looks different in daylight.
I bet she's back at the camp, laughing his butt off.
What the hell is that?
Let's get going with our first featured film review for the evening. We are going to start with this film right here. It is called The Final Terror. This is a slasher horror film released in the year 1983, actually filmed in the year 1981. It sat on the shelf a couple of years and then was released in 1983 for reasons that we will talk about in a moment. It was directed by Andrew Davis. And the cast includes Adrian Zmed, Daryl Hannah, Joe Pantoliano, and a host of unknowns. So yes, that is Officer Vince Romano, T.J. Hooker's partner. That is the mermaid who starred alongside Tom Hanks in Splash, and Joe Pantoliano has been in any number of things. I remember him from The Matrix and also from the terrible Ben Affleck Daredevil movie, but he's been in many things other than that. This is one of those films that was a before they were famous kind of film and sat on the shelf. And then once Adrian Zmed and Daryl Hannah started breaking through and becoming popular, the studio said, hey, don't we have a movie with them in it? Let's release that. So that's why it was released 2 years after it was made. This is a blind box special. What that means is that we did not watch this film before deciding to put it on the schedule to review on Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat. We just saw it on Tubi, free with ads. We saw the program description, said, okay, that looks like it fits in with what we do on our show. We'll make that a blind box special. So, much like back in the days, you would go to Blockbuster, and have to make a decision just based upon what you could read on the back of the box, and you couldn't bail out later. You weren't using a streaming service, so you couldn't get 5 minutes into a movie and say, I don't like this one, let's watch something else. You were stuck with what you paid $3 to rent. So, to bring us back to those days, this is a blind box special. Let's get into setting your expectations for this film. What you should expect is a typical 80s era young people encounter slasher while in the woods kind of film. If you like Friday the 13th, you might like this film. If you like The Burning, The Prey, you might like this film. More recently, if you like something from the Wrong Turn series, you might like this film. They're all kind of the same. Young people out in the woods being stalked by someone or something. So let's get into setting your expectations for this film. This is the scale we like to use. On the far left side of the scale, very campy films, such as Jason X. On the far right side of the scale, very serious films, such as The Silence of the Lambs. As always, this scale is not an indicator of the quality of the film, it is an indicator of what your mindset needs to be going into the film in order to maximize your enjoyment, because we would like to avoid going into a comedy expecting a serious film or vice versa, because a lot of times that will screw up your enjoyment of the movie if it's not what you expect. This film was intended more or less as a mainstream theatrical release, but the fact that it was from the early 80s basically pushes it over a little to the left. That and the fact that it's a slasher film, and they tend to be on the campy side of the spectrum anyway. So it's not a comedy, it's not outright funny, but you can't take it too seriously, A, because it's a slasher film, and B, because it was filmed in the early 80s, and stuff that looked normal at the time looks kind of ridiculous now, like hairstyles and fashion sense and such. So, before we go any farther, we need to get into a vocabulary lesson for this film. This, of course, is the part of the show where we review new and innovative words and phrases in an effort to stay ahead of social media bots and algorithms that would otherwise try to ban our conversation. We've got two terms for this film, starting with contraptionation. Contraptionation is a noun referring to the act in a horror movie of using an ingenious, overly complex, and Scooby-Doo-worthy trap to kill a character. Our second term is one we have used many times, but I don't know if we've ever defined it, coitus interruptus. And this one's not too hard to figure out, but assuming you don't have your older brother or sister around to explain it to you, this is a noun referring to the act in a horror movie of a villain or killer interrupting a canoodling couple in mid-canoodle to attack and or kill one or more of the canoodling characters. Yeah, this happens in lots of slasher films. So, these are your vocabulary words for the week. Please keep these terms in mind. They will become important later in the episode. So let's get into a summary of the final terror. There's not much to this film. At the beginning of the film, a young couple is riding motorcycles on a trail through the woods when one of them falls and is injured. The other goes for help, but then both are killed by a mysterious creature, and you don't really get to see the mysterious creature head on, so you don't exactly know what they were up against. Sometime later, a group of young forest rangers, yes, really, and their girlfriends head up into the woods for a weekend camping trip, despite repeated warnings from the creepy ranger who drives the bus to stay away from that area. Ooh, yep, so they ignore the sentinel like in so many horror films. And you can see where this is going. Some of them are going to make it back, some of them are not. Which leads us, of course, to our villain profile. Our villain for this film is the mysterious woodland killer. Does not really have an iconic name like Pinhead, but there the mysterious woodland killer is. The mysterious woodland killer belongs to the class of mysterious woodland killer creature person things. Uses the special powers of stealth, woodland survival skills, proficiency with bladed weapons, and bonus ferocity stemming from a lack of sanity. And the mysterious woodland killer's signature weapon is a large curved blade, which I'm not exactly sure how to categorize or describe, so I've got a picture of it here, you can kind of see it. Not necessarily the only weapon the mysterious woodland killer uses, but it is used more than once. So let's talk about the things I liked about this film. Well, the start of the film does a good job of setting up tension and a menacing woodland atmosphere, so the bit that involves the two motorcycle riders immediately sets up a sense that these woods are not safe. And also, it's fun to see people who later became stars in their before they were famous films, and it's a nice reminder that everyone starts somewhere. And this is a decent 80s woodland slasher film. Like I said, filmed in 81, released in 83, so viewed against the other films of that era, it's not bad. I've seen some that are so much worse. Of course, it is not without flaw, and it is not without a number of flaws, so let's talk about some of the things that could have been better about this film. Well, for starters, the film is very dark and hard to see at times. I do not mean dark in terms of tone or atmosphere. I mean dark in terms of they're filming out in the woods and they did not have a lighting rig that was up to the task, and it's just kind of hard to see what's going on. After a decent start, the film quickly descends into very predictable mediocrity. There's no way around that. It starts off pretty good, and then after that it becomes, I won't say bad, it just becomes a lot more formulaic and predictable after that. Most of the boys in the film are unlikable. Some of them intentionally unlikable, some maybe not so. The girls are more likable, but they are underdeveloped and interchangeable. A great deal of the action takes place off screen, which makes it very difficult to keep up with who is still alive and who isn't, and that, for me at least, was compounded by the fact that I had a hard time telling some of the characters apart because they were so generic looking and so generic in personality and so interchangeable. So that made it more difficult to follow the plot just because I had a hard time keeping up with who was who. Now, in fairness to the makers of The Final Terror, I was not giving 100% of my attention to the film. I was also trying to take notes on the film, and I also was trying to work on something else at the same time, which is how I work. But, frankly, those of you who watch films at home on streaming services probably are also doing the same thing sometimes. You are probably scrolling here and there on your phone while you have the movie on, and if that is the case, you may find it hard to keep up with who is who and who is alive and who is not in this film. And finally, the film features not just one, but two characters who are raving lunatics, not counting the killer. So yes, you've got two unbearable lunatics in this film, not counting the mysterious woodland killer. So let's get into Steve's scorecard for this film. Kills, I counted 6, maybe? It was very, very difficult to keep track because so much of this happened off screen. I honestly don't know. I think it was 6. I could be completely wrong on that. Bare breasts. I'm going to give it a couple of asterisks. You don't really see any bare breasts. There is some woodland canoodling, but they're pressed up against each other, making the beast with two backs and concealing all the naughty bits. Pez dispenserings, you do get 1. Christmas treeings, again, you get 1. Reverse Trojan warrings, going back to a word from a little while ago, 1. Now, a Trojan warring, as a reminder for those of you who missed that episode, is when a villain slices a character along the Achilles tendon, thus bringing them crashing to the ground. So a reverse Trojan warring is a slice across the front of the ankle, not the Achilles tendon, which, frankly, is far less effective, but I guess if that's what you can reach, that's what you slice. Coitus interruptus, which we defined earlier in this episode, there is one of those. Contraptionations, I'm going to give this film 1.5. There's one at the end of the film that is a definite contraptionation. There's one at the beginning of the film that I'm going to give half credit to, not nearly as over the top and a Rube Goldberg mechanism as the one at the end of the movie, but still a kill by trap nonetheless. Of course, with a film like The Final Terror, you would expect some bonus features, and you would not be wrong. You get Adrian's Med, Daryl Hannah, and Joe Pantoliano sightings. Yes, like I said, Officer Vince Romano from T.J. Hooker. The mermaid from Splash, whose name I do not remember. And Joe Pantoliano, who has been in so many things, including but not limited to the original Matrix, all appear in this film before they were famous. You get Adrian's Med's giant hair, and that is something that you also saw on T.J. Hooker. Adrian's Med had some giant 80s hair. You get, of course there's a mental institution on the way to the campsite. Why wouldn't there be? So you have the crazy person telling them not to go to the woods. You have the mental institution on the way to the woods. You basically have them ignoring every possible sign and going up into the woods anyway. You get Adrian's Med howling like a wolf. You'll have to tell me if that's a plus or a minus. You get woodland canoodling. You get people walking around aimlessly yelling Marco. Yes, really, one of the characters in the film is named Marco, and he disappears out in the woods, and the others are looking for him. And they're walking around all shouting, Marco! Marco! And on the one hand, it's just a bunch of people looking for a guy named Marco. On the other hand, I don't know if they intended this, but it looks like the world's biggest game of Marco Polo being played out in the woods instead of in a swimming pool. Why are the girls English? Yeah, at least one, and I think two of the girls in this film have English accents, and, there's nothing wrong with that, but they don't really explain why. So, Daryl Hannah is just going to spend the entire film smoking pot. Her character was not that deep when you get down to it. She just kind of sat around and smoked pot for the entire movie. It was not a challenging role. You get Joe Pantoliano beatdown action. Yes, he takes quite the beatdown in this film. And finally, where did they find the time and equipment to build that insanely complicated trap? Which is a question that you could ask in every episode of Scooby-Doo, which is what makes this trap Scooby-Doo worthy. Where in the world did they find the time, much less the equipment, to put that together? So let's get to Steve's final score for this film. I'm going to give it 2 paws out of 4, which, as blind box specials go, is not bad. If you sit down and watch a movie that you've never seen before and it's worthy of 2 paws out of 4, you gotta count that as a win. We're going to say that this is a completely perfunctory and predictable film of the 80s slasher stalks young people in the woods variety. There's nothing wrong with it, but there's also not a lot to make it stand out, except for some names that later became famous. So, as we've talked about with some other films, this film doesn't really have an iconic moment or an iconic kill or an iconic event to really drive it into your memory. It's not bad, but you're going to watch it, and then after it's over, it's not really memorable, other than the fact that you've got some people in it who later became famous. But that is Steve's final score for The Final Terror. 2 paws out of 4.
And now a word from our delightful benefactors at PBDCtv, your nightly heartbeat of horror.
This is Mikey from Out of the Ordinary, and you're watching PBDCtv.
First thing in the morning, when I'm listening to music and getting a little bit of time for some creepy research, I'm always representing with my PBDC merch. What a better way to have a cup of coffee in the morning.
Don't forget to check out our other cool merch at rootsbleedred.com. That's rootsbleedred.com.
This is Professor Edgar Fluffosaurus from Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat, and when I'm not hosting Monster Chat or knocking down small Japanese cities, I'm watching PBDCtv. Now back to the show.
There's something wrong with the beer. Can we get a round of tequila instead?
Let's get into our final featured film review for the evening. We are going to talk about this film. It is called Peelers. It is a horror comedy of the zombie attack variety, more specifically the zombie versus stripper variety. Released in the year 2016 in Canada and 2017 in the United States. This is a Canadian film, and I know I sometimes have been tough on Canadian horror films, but this one's pretty good. Directed by, and I know I'm going to mispronounce this, but directed by Seve Chalens, and the cast includes Ren Walker, Kaz Odin Darko, and an assortment of others you've never heard of either. Let's get into setting your expectations for Peelers. If you're going to watch this film, what you should expect is a much better than expected film of the zombies versus strippers variety, combining gore, good production values, and a fairly light-hearted tone. This is not a serious film. This is not The Walking Dead where people brood and brood and brood. This is intended to be a horror comedy. If you like Return of the Living Dead, you should enjoy this film, or a film we talked about last season. If you enjoyed The Night Watchman, you should enjoy this one. Actually, 2 seasons ago, I believe, we talked about The Night Watchman. Both of those are comedies that feature a lot of zombies, or in the case of Night Watchman, it's vampires, but they behave like zombies, so it kind of falls under the zombie epidemic category anyway. Let's get into the scale we like to use and calibrate your sights before you go into watching this film. Now, on the far left side of our scale, very campy films such as Jason X. On the far right side of the scale, very serious films such as The Silence of the Lambs. Now, what we're about to show you is not an assessment of the quality of the film. What we're about to show you is an indication of what your mindset needs to be going into the film Peelers if you're going to maximize your enjoyment of the film. You need to be pretty far over into the very campy part of the spectrum if you're going to enjoy Peelers. Now, it is an extremely violent, gory film, but it is extremely violent and gory in the same way as, say, The Night Watchman or Return of the Living Dead, that it's all kind of horror comedy stuff. It's not intended to be terrifying. It's just intended to be a zombie horror comedy. So, pretty far over to the left side of the spectrum, pretty campy film. Before we go any farther, we need to do a vocabulary lesson. This, of course, is the part of the show where we talk about new and innovative words and phrases in an effort to stay ahead of social media bots and algorithms that would otherwise try to ban our conversation. We've got 2 terms for this film. The first is smoosh noodling, going back to last season, but to review for those of you who haven't seen it before, smoosh noodling is a noun that refers to the action of flattening, bursting, or squishing a character's noggin through the sudden application of a large mass or blunt object. Colloquial forms of this include melon clonking and Gallaghering. Think of what Gallagher used to do to watermelons, and think of that happening to somebody's noggin. That's smoosh noodling. Our second term is tree felling, which we just talked about not too long ago, but we're going to review it again. Tree felling is a noun referring to the act in a horror movie of one character killing another character using a chainsaw. Colloquial forms of this include lumberjacking and releasing the woodsman. Please keep these terms in mind. They will become important later in the episode. So let's get into a summary of this film. Blue Jean is the central character of this show. Blue Jean is a former stripper who now owns and operates a small-town strip club. And we have a question mark there because she's not stripping on the night of this film, but we don't know if she never does or not. Because, one person in the crowd asks, "Hey, Blue Jean, are we going to see you tonight?" And she says, "Maybe." You do see a flashback of her as a stripper, but I get the impression that she is now a former stripper who focuses on running the club. She is being forced to sell the club, unfortunately, to the town's local mogul, because all small towns have a local mogul, and the film takes place on what is going to be the closing night of her club. A group of 4 local coal miners have stopped by her club on closing night, and they are in a great mood and wanting to celebrate, well, something. They're being kind of mysterious about what they want to celebrate, like they don't want anyone else to find out something that they know, but they think they are on the verge of something really great. Why are the coal miners oily? And why are they starting to act so strangely? Well, the coal miners are in a good mood because down in the coal mine, they think they struck oil and they therefore think they are going to become rich. What they do not realize is that the oil that they have struck is tainted and will turn them into our villain for the film, which is black goo zombies. Oh yes, here are the black goo zombies. Yes, zombies oozing black goo. These are of the zombie class of the fast, agile variety, so these are not shambling zombies like in The Walking Dead. These are the fast kind of zombies. These are the kind of zombies that are still psychotic and can still use weapons. All becoming a zombie has done is made them more lethal and more difficult to kill. Their special powers include tremendous strength and viciousness, and they are practically unkillable. Even headshots do not work. And, bonus, contact with the black goo spreads the zombie virus. Their signature weapon? Well, there are a number of black goo zombies in this film, and they use a variety of weapons, including but not limited to knives and deer antlers. Yes, really. Small town bar that's got a deer head hanging on the wall. The deer antlers get used as a weapon at one point. Don't believe me? Watch the film. So let's talk about some of the things I liked about this film. I will say, I went into this one with low expectations. I found this movie free with ads on Tubi. I expected to get about 5 minutes into it and stop it because it was just going to be a really low-budget, unbearable, cheesy film. But it turned out the film was much better than I expected. Not only did I watch it all the way to the end, I wanted to go back and watch it a second time. And at that point, we said, hey, let's put this one in the show. It's worth doing. It is a cheesy zombie stripper film, but the production values actually are pretty good. It looks good on screen. It does not look low budget. The characters are likable and reasonably well developed, at least as far as cheesy zombie stripper films go. Now, it is not Silence of the Lambs, but it doesn't shoot to be Silence of the Lambs. It is, for what it aims to deliver, it actually delivers some reasonably well developed characters. The special effects are very good. There is a combination of practical special effects and CGI. I think the CGI is mainly just used for some of the blood spatter. Other than that, it is primarily practical special effects. And the pacing of the film is good. It never drags, but it never feels rushed, and it feels like it's about the right length. It's not one of those films where the final act seems to go on too long. It's not one of those films where it feels like it was poorly edited and 20 minutes have been cut out of the film and it doesn't go together. It feels just about right. Now, it is a cheesy zombies versus strippers film, so you would guess that there are some things that could have been better about this film. Let's talk about a few of those. Right off the bat, this is an unserious, cheesy film. If that's not for you, give this one a pass. Just, like I've said before, just say, the joke's not intended for me, I'm just going to move on and watch something else. Do not watch this film and then say it's a bad film if you don't enjoy cheesy zombie stripper films. You have been warned. You knew what it is going in. That's on you. That's not the film's fault. The film is very violent and very gory. If that's not for you, give this one a pass. The film definitely breaks some of the traditional horror film rules. No one is safe. And let me re-emphasize that. No one is safe. One more time. No one is safe. If that's not for you, give this one a pass. Now, I'm not going to get into the specifics of why I keep saying no one is safe, but you need to remember that in this film, no one is safe. In fact, the final 5 seconds of the film features something absolutely horrific that would have really bothered me were this not a light zombie comedy. And finally, the cast finally do figure out how to kill the zombies, and it makes no sense. Even the film says it makes no sense. Don't believe me? Let's take a look.
I think I got it.
What?
These things, they're infected by some sort of bad oil. We could use that to our advantage.
Use what to our advantage?
What do they say about oil and water?
They don't mix.
Exactly.
Yeah, but the human body's made up of 60 to 70% water. By mass alone, each human cell consists of somewhere between 65 to 90% H2O. College. Biology is my major.
Yeah, I just didn't think you went to class.
So how is more water gonna stop them? It doesn't make sense.
See what I mean? It's rare that a film calls BS on their own premise, but I actually give them credit for that. This is something that campy films could get away with doing more often. Just point out the fact that one of the things that happens in the film is ridiculous, and then have the conversation move on to something else before they get to the resolution of why it's ridiculous or why it might work. And you can have your cake and eat it too. You can have a ridiculous premise and say, well, we know it's ridiculous. Anyway, let's get to Steve's scorecard for this film. Number of kills, I estimated 22 plus a number more off screen. Bare breasts, I counted 12. That is from a variety of different lovely ladies. Denogginings, 3. Possumings, I counted 1. Evil Knievelings, 1. Yes, there is one motorcycle stunt that does not go well for the writer. Fastballs to the head. Blue Jean is a former baseball player and she still has a wicked fastball. You see no fewer than 4 fastballs to the head throughout the course of this film. Pez dispenserings, 1. Smoosh noodlings, 1. And tree fellings, 1. But that is not all. With your viewing of the cheesy Zombies vs. Strippers film Peelers, you also get a number of bonus features. You get opening credits that go on forever. Probably the worst thing about this film, and the one thing that made me most likely to turn it off before I got into the film and realized it was actually pretty good, was the fact that the opening credits just kept going on and on and on and on. Of course, a guy brings his chainsaw to the strip club for repair. Who doesn't do that? It's one of those things right away you see and you're like, okay, so obviously they're making an excuse to introduce a chainsaw into the film. Now, it's a small town. One of the guys who happens to work at the bar in his spare time does small motor repair, and so the guy is dropping off the chainsaw with him, but you know what's really up with that. Why is a new stripper starting on closing night? Now, that is something that they never really explain. So you have the stereotypical first night for the newbie stripper, and she's all nervous, and it didn't even click in my mind the first time I watched this film, but the second time around, it's like, wait a minute, this is closing night. This is the last night the club is going to be open. Why is she starting on closing night? Maybe there was a rational explanation, but one was never offered. You get oil puking action. You get golden shower action. Yes, really, I could have lived without that. You get VIP room action. You get musical beaver action. Yes, that is exactly what it sounds like, and I am not going to say any more about that. If you want more information, watch the film. You get deputy snogging action. You get stripper kung fu action, and who does not love some good stripper kung fu? You get chainsaw beating action. At one point, the chainsaw will not start, so it gets used as a club. Glocks don't use external safeties, but Berettas do. Actually, I don't know enough about Beretta handguns to know if that's true, but in this film, the person who owns a Beretta supposedly does not understand how the external safety works. And finally, want to see me make this baseball disappear? Yes, remember the classic line from The Dark Knight when Joker says, I'm going to make this pencil disappear? Something similar happens in this film with a baseball that I'm not going to try to describe, just you have to see the film. But yes, Blue Jean does make a baseball disappear. So Steve's final score for this film, I give it 3 paws out of 4, and I never would have expected going into this film to give it 3 paws out of 4, but I really enjoyed it. It's one of those films, like I said, I watched and wanted to go back and watch a second time. I enjoyed it so much. So we're going to say this is a cheesy zombies versus strippers film that overachieves in comparison to what you would expect. Now, it is gory, it is violent, and it violates a number of taboos. But the light tone of the film makes it at least a little more tolerable. Now, if you cannot handle gore, do not watch this film. If you cannot handle a horror film that violates some of the traditional horror movie taboos, do not watch this film. If you watch it anyway, you have been warned. That said, if you view it for what it is and what they sell it as, I give it 3 paws out of 4. I enjoyed this one, and I recommend it to people who can enjoy a good, lighthearted, cheesy zombies versus strippers film. So that is the final word on the film Peelers. We are winding down yet another episode of Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat. But before we go, we'd like to take just a few minutes to talk about some of the other things we watched this week. Now, as we've been doing all season long, we're going to make this a team effort. We're going to go around the horn. I'm going to go first. This is Steve the Cat. And this week, I watched this film, something called Absentia. I found this free with ads on Tubi. Absentia is an independent supernatural horror film that was made in the year 2011, and it tells the story of Trisha, who is a pregnant woman living in Glendale, California. Now, Trisha's life is tragic because Trisha's husband, Daniel, has been missing for 7 years. Yes, the woman whose husband has been missing for 7 years is pregnant. That is a plot point. You will have to watch the film to understand more about that. Anyway, Trisha's sister Callie, who is a recovering addict, comes to visit to give Trisha support because Trisha, after 7 years, is going to have Daniel declared dead in absentia, and that's kind of stressful, and she's trying to help her sister just kind of move through that and move on and get a new start with her life. But things get strange when an incoherent, physically and mentally abused Daniel suddenly reappears. Yes, Daniel comes back after being missing for 7 years. He's not making a whole lot of sense. The doctors say he is malnourished and shows lots of signs of physical abuse. They can't understand where he has been, but obviously they can't have him declared dead because he is back. What does all of this have to do with the creepy tunnel down the street? Well, it's long and it's complicated, but I'll tell you, this is an excellent film if you like supernatural or psychological horror films. I absolutely recommend this film. When I first started watching it, I just thought it was kind of mediocre, but it got better and better and better, and I liked it more and more as it went on. And now that I've watched it all the way through, I would really like to go back and watch it all over again from the beginning again. I do recommend this film. Now, it is not a film with a lot of action or special effects or kills. It is not a slasher film or anything like that by any means. It is all psychological horror and supernatural stuff, but it is very good. So if that is up your alley, I highly recommend Absentia. So now let's turn things over to our new contributor, Lavender Harlequin.
Salutations and good chakras to you all. This is your friend and child of Gaia, Lavender Harlequin, psychic extraordinaire and expert in all things supernatural. This week, I reverted to my astral form and stretched out to the universe and asked it, what film should I review? And it brought me to this film right here, The Dark Waters of Echo's Pond. And I thought that was appropriate because much as my astral form bathes in the collective consciousness of the universe, I would let my mind and physical body bathe in this film. So this is a free film with ads on Tubi. It is a 2009 supernatural fantasy horror film. In this film, a group of 20-something friends gather at a plush house on an island for a weekend gathering. And of course, we should all do things like this. We're all children of Gaia and we should all come together. While they are there, they discover a strange board game and decide to play. Now, we should not all do that. What we should do is watch Guinevere's show from a few weeks back when I explained the dangers of cursed toys, cursed puzzles, and cursed board games. Do not play mysterious board games, people. As they play the game, they set off a chain of increasingly terrifying supernatural events. Now, it's an ancient one-off kind of board game that's used in this film. In reality, I'm sure they intended this to represent Candyland, but you would not use a real Candyland game while trying to film a movie because even trying to put together a work of fiction, messing with Candyland is too dangerous. Never, ever mess with the rules of Candyland, people. That way lies madness. Anyway, the one notable thing about this film is that it includes Danielle Harris, but even so, it is a below-average film. However, there are so many bad films in this segment of young 20-somethings or young teens getting together in a vacation house and supernatural things happening that this one ends up being mediocre by comparison. So, at the end of the day, You can find worse things on Tubi for sure, but you can also find better things. I can't recommend it, but it's not the worst thing available either, so that is The Dark Waters of Echo's Pond. Now, we turn you over to that stinky ape, Crimson Meerkat.
Stinky ape. Charming as always, Harlequin. Charming as always. Hey, go blow your nose. Anyway, this is Crimson Meerkat. I am the leader of the scientific endeavor known as Project Brevity. I am a credentialed author, an expert in all things conspiratorial, and this week I am once again forced to stoop to something well below my intellectual station because I am contractually obligated to occasionally review films for PBDCtv. And, of course, I do not get to pick the film, so this week I was forced to watch this film called The Disembodied. This film is available free with ads on Tubi, so at least they did not force me to pay for something that I did not want to watch. This is a 2011 horror comedy creature feature from Full Moon Productions, and that should send a shiver down your spine. Full Moon Productions. You know what that means. Lots of writhing, nubile, beautiful young women. Oh, you people are animals. Your animal rutting disgusts me. Anyway, this is a sequel to the 1999 film The Killer Eye, and it is also known as The Killer Eye 2 Halloween Haunt. So it has been released under 2 different titles. In this film, a group of 5 unusually attractive young ladies, of course, are decorating a house for Halloween. And through a series of events, the girls start watching a copy of The Killer Eye, the film from 1999, for which this is a sequel. And during the course of watching this film, they manage to accidentally bring a plastic replica of The Killer Eye to life. And of course, it has all the powers of The Killer Eye in the film. Folks, this is a cheesy, eye-candy, exploitation-style horror comedy, and it is terrible. But that's what they were going for. They were going for a terrible film that you would laugh at and look at the pretty ladies. So, if that's your kind of thing, you will enjoy it. If you have enjoyed other things from Full Moon Productions, you will probably enjoy this one. It's no better or no worse. They're all pretty much the same thing. I did not like this film, but if it's your kind of thing, you'll probably enjoy it. And that is what I watched this week.
That wraps up another episode of Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you enjoyed the show. As always, if you enjoyed the show, please take a moment to give us a like and a share. The biggest thing you can do to help us out is to share this video. Also, feel free to leave a comment about the films we discussed tonight, or maybe tell us about your own favorite, or maybe tell us about another film that features famous actors before they were famous. If you would like to stay up to date on our latest videos, then please take a moment to stop by and check us out on social media, and hit that subscribe button. You can find Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat on Facebook, YouTube, and Rumble. And yes, that's Tales spelled with an A-I-L-S. Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat is just one of the shows you can find on the PBDCtv Broadcast Collective. If you're interested in horror, true crime, weird history, creepy stories, or unexplained events, then PBDCtv is sure to have something for you. You can find us online at PBDCtv.com, and you can also find us on Facebook, YouTube, and Rumble. We'll be back again next week with 2 more films, including one from the VHS era of horror, so be sure to drop back by next week. Once again, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate all the support. Everyone stay safe and have a great week. We'll see you again soon. Good night, everybody.